president for Tea Botanics, and I have a clinic called Ohana Natural Health. And here we do all kinds of natural stuff for people, giving people education on the most up-to-date research on nutrition and what's going on around, the world. So that's it.
What are some of the menopausal symptoms caused by age-related decline of estrogen?
There's many, but probably everybody thinks about memory decline, brain fog, hot flashes, anxiety, that type of thing.
There's so many different pills, herbals that you can take on the market. What makes hot flash tea different?
For one, when people have symptoms, these women, they don't want to just pop pills all the time. Sometimes they want to maybe drink some water or some tea. And what's unique about the tea that we have with the hot flash tea is that it's only made in one place in the world. It's in Taiwan as one of the major ingredients that provide a relief to both the sympathetic system and the hormonal system. So it's a 2-for-1, but it can do regulations for both. And it's all natural, of course, so there is no side effects or interactions. But of course, if you're taking any medications, you need to consult with your doctors that are responsible for your health too.
I hear this term a lot, but I'm not sure I really know what it means. What is perimenopause?
So we know that menopause is when the ladies don't have a period for about 12 months, or if they have a premature surgery of hysterectomy or something. Perimenopause will refer to maybe 1 to 3 years, usually, the period before you get to menopause. So in between those time periods, you could already have some symptoms. The ones that we mentioned, hot flashes, memory issues, brain fog, yeah, vaginal dryness, you name them.
Great, thank you so much. We got another question. Why are my hot flashes more at night as opposed to during the day?
Okay, that's a good question. There's many facets to this, so I don't know, should I go long or short, but let me answer it the best way I can. I hope y'all didn't have lunch yet, or it's not going to be too much information. But for example, let's talk about the pineal gland, the hypothalamus and the pituitary. So the pineal gland releases melatonin. Melatonin generally is up higher during nighttime when things go dark. So it releases melatonin so we can, go to sleep and do some healing. Melatonin is actually released in our lymphocytes, those white blood cells too. Therefore, when they release that, the lymphocytes will start to do some clearing or finishing off the bugs or infections of that sort. That's when, when heat particles collide, there's friction, there is heat. So that's the melatonin. When you wake up, the cortisol raises. As you go down into the dust, then cortisol goes down. Cortisol suppresses the immune system. So if you have an ongoing, a pre-existing infection issue or condition of any sort, like autoimmune, for example, if you have those and your immune system is no longer being suppressed during the nighttime or late afternoon, then heat comes up too. So that's the pineal side of things. And remember, the pineal really uses a lot of the vitamin D. So this is why during COVID times, if your vitamin D is low, you also are more prone to infection, especially for the people who don't have much, sun exposure, like say Seattle or England or something. So with the hypothalamus gland, it's the governor control, it's the regulator for our temperatures, emotions, and hunger. So when you get prone to infection, let's say you get infected with a virus or something, your temperature will go up because viruses will replicate and generate heat, and your hypothalamus is exposed, outside the blood-brain barrier, and then you get heat, and then you get hot flashes. So most of the time, that happens at nighttime. So one other reason, though, let's say you have, let's say, a parasite. Bugs like that, they're usually nocturnal, which means they come out more at night. I mean, like I said, don't munch too much information. If you have one of those weird parasites that like to come out nighttime, they crawl out of your butthole, they lay some eggs, crawl back into your butthole. Then you get itchy. They will let the eggs just hatch like that based on the temperature. So those are some of the reasons for that. I like that question though.
Thank you so much for that very informative answer. I see that Denise Pines is here. Denise, do you want to pick up with the questions?
Ask Dr. Pei the next question, and then I'll jump in.
Perfect. Dr. Pei, okay, so the next question is, I'm 42 years old and I have very low energy. What could be some of the causes?
We briefly touched upon the cortisol, which is released by the adrenal gland. So if you're 42, yep, if you're 42, it could be many reasons. You could have low energy based on your adrenals. You could be anemic, and you could have low vitamin Bs. Many reasons, but sometimes it could be due to your low thyroid. I mean, women of this age are usually working these days or taking care of teenage kids. They get tired. So there's a lot of stress involved, and your immune system goes down. You could have low energy based on your.
Thank you so much.
You could be anemic.
You could have. The next question. Many reasons. Is I'm about to turn 56 and I've been suffering with hot flashes for 10 years. What do you think is going on? Is it normal to have hot flashes for 10 years?
Not really, but when you think about the hot flashes, like I mentioned before, possibly it could be hormonal imbalance or most of the time toxicity, xenobiotics, chemical poisoning, virus infections or parasitic infections that cause this issue. So if we don't take care of those issues, it'll just continue to be an ongoing issue. So it's not normal to have hot flashes for 10 years, unless, if you've done nothing to the hot flashes, meaning you did not take care of the toxins, you did not detox, you did not take care of your nutrition, did not, reduce stress or any way that you can, then the hot flashes will be forever, probably.
Thank you. We appreciate that. The next question is, since going into menopause, I get yeast infections that never seem to go away. What can I do? What's causing them?
So that's what we talked about. When you go into, well, this is new. I didn't mention this earlier. When you go into perimenopause or even menopause, your prolactin goes up. And when prolactin goes up, it's suppressing your dopamine and all your immune system function. Because obviously you're not breastfeeding, and that's at this time when the prolactin goes up because you're menopausal. So when that goes up, your immune system goes down. The way to regulate the immune system happens in the gut. So when the good probiotics or the good microbiome decreases, the bad guys raise up. People all know about the candida yeast thing, yeast infection. So that's what happens. This is where you really have to eat well, meaning don't eat, I guess I don't want to piss off the dairy industry, but dairy products, eggs, and gluten, they really, like bread and pasta, they really kick up the candida. So that's the yeast infection.
Well, I think you kind of answered this next question with your answer from before, because this is saying, do hot flashes end when your period actually stops and you're through menopause? And it appears that no, that's not the case.
Yeah, for most people, if your immune system has been good and you didn't have a lot of activation of viruses, for example, or parasites, then you might go into a smooth transition where you don't have the hot flashes. But it really depends too. For example, if you had an ongoing thyroid issue, your iodine goes low, your calcium goes low, your choline, or vitamin B goes low. That's when it will trigger all kinds of, we call immune cytokine storms. Your memory will go down and your brain will get inflamed, which will trigger other inflammation. You see? So yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
I hope I answered.
The next question is, does metabolism improve after you go through menopause? In other words, will it be a little bit easier to lose weight, or does it make it more difficult to lose weight?
Typically, logically, it'll be more difficult to lose weight because of the estrogen and progesterone decrease. But also, it is a dysregulation of your blood sugar. For example, if you're prone to stress. See, everyone's different. Let's say you never were stressed out. Then when you hit menopause, it's easier to manage that period of time where your digestion and metabolism can stay relatively the same. But if you're stressed out, okay, well, you're going to pack on some weight. But in this day and age, who is not stressed, right? So I guess the ideal way to handle this is to de-stress the best you can, because to each their own. You got to eat maybe smaller meals throughout the day, and if you know that you're anemic, don't over exercise, because if you do, you'll just probably oxidize yourself. Like a piece of metal that just rust, and you can crack them easily.
Understood. Thank you so much for that answer. Another person has asked, is forgetfulness a symptom of menopause? I can't seem to remember anything. I get confused a lot. I'm very tired. I lack energy. What do you think is happening? I know you dealt with some of the lack of energy in a previous question, but can you speak to the forgetfulness
Yeah,
and the brain fog?
Yeah, I think I just answered that in the last question too, regarding choline, a vitamin B. So when you hit menopause, if your pineal, hypothalamus, and pituitary are really stressed out, the adrenal stresses out too, and the thyroid has to pull it back. They're like sister glands. And when the thyroid is really tired from, let's say, radiation or slow metabolism, your iodine and your choline goes down, and that affects the memory. Of course, you need omega-3 to supplement the brain, because the brain is made up of a lot of fat, 60 to 70% fat, cholesterol.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
The next question we have is, I'm 39. Am I too young for hot flashes? Like 1 minute I'm fine, the next minute I have to stand in front of a fan. Could it be something else?
Yeah. Also related to what we talked about. If you had no infection or prior history, very low of those things, then you wouldn't have too much. For example, let's say you start to get cold feet, cold hand, clammy, cold sweats. Okay, maybe your adrenal and thyroid are both at play. Then we have to see how to calm that peripheral nerve system. And that's why we use tea, because it's easy to drink. And you don't have to drink the tea hot. You can drink them cold too, depending on the climate and the season. So when you drink it, you simultaneously achieve the relaxation, because we really don't know. I mean, the tea is designed for the general public, so we don't know what other people may have individually. But this way, when a person is going through hot flashes at 39, and it might be a little early, but people are getting it earlier now. It may be a sign of overly stress or overly poor diet, but that's what we mean by modulating the diet and keeping a good stress, not the bad ones.
So diet is very important to all
Yeah.
of these things, simply
Mhm.
because it'll help you stay in balance.
Yeah, for sure.
Perfect. Okay. What are some hot flash friendly foods that you have?
So there are many. I mean, if we're talking about, I can't be talking about herbs because I don't want to be giving people the false impression. But generally, people can use black cohosh, echinacea, wild yam. They can use even St. John's wort, but you see, that's where it gets murky, because I don't want to be telling people to do these herbs and then they have some sort of medication they're taking that interacts with them. So food wise, yeah, I would be easier. So let me just take a look here on the foods, for example. The alkaline vegetables that is listed in my website, but I'm looking at it. You can start with what I call the triple A's: the arugulas, the artichokes, asparagus. Those are top three, plus beets. When you eat these things, you allow the body, a liver, to go through a very smooth detox, like a methylation and uh, just supporting the overall sulfation of the body, of the liver detox. For example, if you eat radishes, that'll also support it. Anything that can help your body move toxins and excessive storage of estrogen in your liver at this moment, even though during menopause you do need the estrogen. So, a few more foods. If you just look at the list, I mean, celery is on top of the list too. I know celery juice has become a major movement, and we agree with that. Eating celery or drinking celery juice is good for both men and women. For men, for the prostate and for minerals. And for women, it's good for everything. Let's say you got infection and you got low mineral because of perimenopause or menopause, then celery will really help. The cluster salt in there is not going to really raise the blood pressure unless you have a really high blood pressure. And if you're really having an imbalance of potassium, sodium, and calcium, then you got to be careful. And for most Asians, for some reason, maybe it's due to the dampness of the yeast that they have or the coldness, they usually get diarrhea doing celery juice. So I would say just be careful. Um, See what your body can handle. Do celery juicing if it doesn't give you any runs to the bathroom. But eating the foods in my website and the one I just mentioned, for example, the artichokes, the asparagus, these things are really good for the symptoms.
That's great. So artichokes, the three A's, artichokes,
Arugula.
arugula, and asparagus, and
Mhm.
beets, and celery. Perfect.
There's more. I mean, there's more. I was just listing some because, there's too many to list. I have to look at the list to tell everybody. But in general, we can tell people what to avoid for the most part, because if we do that, that's 50%.
Perfect.
The list to avoid is smaller than the list to eat, you see. That's why if you just know in general, the dark greens are always good. Fruits are good, but just keep in mind there are a few caveats. For menopausal women, they need fat. They need good fat. They can't be eating donuts and pizza and say, "Oh, I'm getting my dairy and all these good fat." That's not good fat. Avocado is good fat, but when you eat avocado, it's a fat, right? But when you eat it with carbohydrates, it becomes a fat and sugar combination. Going back to what I just said about the dysregulation of blood sugar, if you eat these things, your lipase, your pancreatic lipase, your small intestine, your gallbladder do not have enough bile salt. You just can't really digest these things. So I would say always look into the fat and sugar combo. Make sure you don't eat them together.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that. My last question, and then I'm going to bring
Yeah,
Denise Pines on, um, is can a woman get pregnant while going through menopause? That's one
you
part of
know,
it.
yeah, it's hard to say. If you're completely menopausal, then no, most likely no, because the ovulation stops, and then you have that negative feedback loop from the pituitary of the luteinizing hormone and FSH. So it's harder. But if you're perimenopausal, the answer is possibly. But I
Okay,
wouldn't think menopausal women want to have kids at that time.
you might be right. Um, then the second part to that question is how can you tell the difference between hot flashes due to menopause and hot flashes due to another medical reason?
That is really hard to tell. Like I said earlier, let's say your hot flashes are accompanying, like, say, a cold sweat, and it's clammy, really, really clammy, and you know that you're getting dizzy or something. Okay, well, maybe you have an infection. If you just have a low omega-3, if you have a low fatty acid profile, then you could have a memory-induced or just a temperature-induced hot flash. But yeah, it's really hard to tell. That's why in my office I do muscle testing. Of course, we combine that with our Zyto scan and our blood test to figure out what is exactly is going on. But yes, it's not easy to tell.
Thank you so much for that. Now I'm going to
Hmm.
bring in Denise Pines, who is
Hi,
Pei, how are you?
the
good, good.
co-founder of T Botanics. Denise, please take it away.
Okay, I'm with my
Thanks, Ginger.
my partner, my chief medical officer for T Botanics. I'm very excited to be here. So, Dr. Pei, why are so many women at midlife getting autoimmune diseases? What the heck? Uh-oh.
It's live. He's frozen for a little bit. We'll see if we can get him back.
Oh no. Okay. Technical difficulties. Oh, did we lose him? Okay. I wish I could answer that question, but I cannot answer that question. I'm going to ask him about autoimmune disease. There's so many women who are getting autoimmune diseases. I have quite a few friends who are being diagnosed with early stage autoimmune disease, like maybe early stage lupus or early stage something else. And um, um, one of the things that I do know is diet has a lot to do with the triggers of autoimmune disease. Just in terms of things that I've talked to numerous doctors about. So I know that one is we can control a lot of the disease states like autoimmune diseases by our foods, but you have to know what foods really work. Dr. Pei earlier started talking about like how do we use food to actually detox as opposed to doing some funny detox stuff, right? And it's foods that a lot of times we don't include regularly in our diet. He talked about arugula, he talked about asparagus, he mentioned celery and radish and artichokes. Um, I have to be honest, I love radish and I have that every week. I have it with my salad, but I don't, I can't remember the last time I've had arugula. So I'm going to look at that. And artichoke, I actually love artichokes, but I rarely have them. And maybe I've got to learn how to cook an artichoke. Now, celery juice is something that I started drinking last year. I want to say I am probably 4 or 5 months into having celery juice almost every morning, first thing on my belly.
Okay. I think I'm back.
So I've been filling in.
Oh, thanks. I lost internet at the office. It's happening more and more recently, more frequently too.
Yeah.
Using my phone.
Okay. So the question I asked was, why are so many women at midlife getting diagnosed with autoimmune diseases?
Okay. Yeah. So I mentioned part of it earlier because most ladies, they tend to inherit viruses because viruses are dormant for the most part. They feed on our nutrients, and the nutrients they like to feed on are things that raise inflammation, such as acidy foods, right? So that's sugar, eggs, meat, that type of thing. So and dairy and gluten, all that. When they eat more of those, the inflammation goes up. Now, um, for the people that missed the first part, when you head into perimenopause or menopause, your immune system starts to go down. For example, if your cortisol is high, it suppresses the immune system, right? But then when your adrenals can no longer handle it, everything goes down, except for prolactin. If prolactin goes up, your immune system modulation also goes down. So you have a bunch of mechanisms that suppress that immune system or no longer can handle it. Now the viruses go, oh, we are unchained. Let's go out and feast. That's where they all come out. They essentially mutate or just migrate out of your bone marrow because remember we mentioned the estrogen. When we hit menopause, your estrogen goes down along with progesterone. Estrogen is key to building the bone, or at least keeping the bone from breaking down like crazy. And when you don't have those, your interleukin 6, your inflammatory marker just go up. And then that triggers white blood cell migration to outside of the bone, and boom, you have autoimmune. So I don't know. That's a long question, long answer to that.
Okay, so if I get diagnosed with like early stage lupus, what can I do?
First, you need to go see both types of docs like that. I never tell people, hey, you know what, just go to holistic doctors because that's one side of the equation. If you go see a medical doctor who's open to holistic practices, that's great because you still need imaging, you still need blood testing. Those are really practical for us to see. For example, antibody markers. So you do blood testing. Of course, holistic doctors could do blood tests too. What I meant was sometimes your fees could be mitigated by insurance. So you want to go see both sides to hear their opinions on what they say. So for example, let's say you got lupus. A medical doctor might say, all right, well, we might give you a methotrexate, just like RA. They might give you, DMARDs, such as hydroxychloroquine. They might give you those, which are pretty effective, but they're still medication. When you hear those opinions, you go to your holistic doctor. Hey, what else can I do to keep myself healthy? naturally. Dieting, taking supplements to not just suppress the symptoms, but also get rid of the actual cause, be it heavy metals, viruses, parasitics, etc. So that's what I would say. Rather long answer to a short question.
Call from 323. Sorry about that. 534.
Yeah.
Another question I have that people have asked is intermittent fasting is all the craze, like keto and all that stuff. Our next time we come back, we're going to talk about all of the diet stuff, right? We'll have a conversation about the whole diet stuff.
Okay.
But
you want me to piss off some people, huh?
No. We'll have a gentle conversation, not to really put, but for people to understand what they're really doing, like what these diets really are, what the foods are that they have you focus on and putting into your body, but what is actually happening when you put so much protein into your body at the expense of what you talked about before, the things you need to always be having to detox your body, right? The body always is in a need to be recycling itself and cleansing itself. And I don't think we've ever been taught that how the body works this way, right?
Yeah.
So intermittent fasting craze, how is this good for women during this life stage?
Like I said, because of the cortisol and adrenal issues with connection to the dysregulation of blood sugar, I'm not a fan of intermittent fasting, especially when you need the fuel. I know some people like to do a keto and then intermittent fasting. It's a big topic out there. I would say this, in my office, most people that do intermittent fasting, if they have the proper nutrients, amino acids, minerals, fatty acids, then they do well. And I also see that if they need to use your brain, because that's glucose, you need your fat glucose. When they need to work next day and it's a high stressful job, without the minerals and the glucose to function, you just get groggy. So intermittent fasting is good for people who wake up next morning that don't have to work next day. It'll be good. This morning, I'm not working today, so I'm doing this. So this morning, I didn't really eat breakfast. But just before the call, I want to make sure that I'm not blanking out. So I ate my fruits as a snack. See, that's another thing. You want to eat your fruit as a snack and not as a main meal, or eat too much of it, or eat it right after meal. Those are some of the things.
Can you talk a little bit? Can you expand upon that a little bit more? Because we always fruit comes with the main meal. Most of the time when we have fruit with the meal is usually our breakfast. So if I have the standard American diet breakfast, it's eggs, some kind of bacon, a biscuit, some kind of bread, toast, English muffin, and a side of fruit. So talk to me about what's going on that plate, and we'll end with that discussion.
That's called a sad diet, standard American diet. It's really sad to see that all going at the same time. I mean, I get it. Everything all go to the same place at the end. We want it to taste good and all that. I mean, I used to love bacon too when I was younger. I used to love all these eggs and everything. But essentially, you're eating lots of fat and protein and sugar all together. And you see, these things take more time to process in the stomach first. And then your gallbladder will have to release the bile salt. Your pancreas will have to release these enzymes, digestive enzymes. And stomach has to release acids, all together to make a bolus to digest. When you put all that together, it is going to sit there and ferment. So not that pretty. It's going to take a while, not to mention all the indigestion, bloating, burpiness, and all that. Not recommended in my book, but I get it. People need to make smaller changes. So it'll take time.
So tell me what's happening with the fruit eating.
The fruit. Okay, so when you eat the fruits after the meal, it's stacked on top of the heavy meal. Simple glucose could be broken down very fast, so the body will be able to break down the fruits fast, but not the proteins, right? So when you do that, it's gonna just start fermenting on top of it. So no good. Now you have a good food, but eating at the wrong time and it becomes bad food.
And what happens when the fruit starts to ferment?
Well, you start to have these fomentation of bad bacteria, yeast, uh, so your probiotics start to go down and your microbiome start to go into imbalance. Then you start to have gas, bloating, indigestion. So that's that.
So then can I have, so if I'm going to eat the SAD diet, can I just then start with fruit as my appetizer? And so eat what, can I just start with eating my fruit so that gets processed?
Then you eat the SAD diet?
And then I put my SAD on it?
Oh, it's a little bit better, but it's still not recommended. If you had to do the SAD diet, I would probably just eat more veggies on top of it. At least it'll help you break them down. Think of it as washing your hands with soap versus without soap. Vegetables would be your soap to emulsify the fat. It'll help.
Okay. And on that note, we have, thank you, Dr. Pei, for
that was half an hour already. Good.
Joining us, right? 30 minutes of wise health advice. We will do this once a month with Dr. Pei on Thursdays. We'll usually do it for 30 minutes at the noon hour on in Los Angeles, so Pacific Coast time. We look forward to you joining us again in a month, Dr. Pei, to impart more of your wisdom and to answer more of our questions that we have.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you.
Hey, you're welcome. Thank you. Talk soon.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.